I screwed something up, but I do screw stuff up often.
If you're not pushing the envelope and breaking stuff, at least I said there was the term breaking shit and busting stuff.
I know. I've certainly. All right, here we go. All right, we're live. I've certainly broken more things in my career than I've fixed. Does the same hold true for you?
Oh yeah. I used to, so a lot of the folks that I've worked with reported to me over the years. I just told them, I said, if we're setting something up and if you're able to get something deployed and you set it up and it goes in like first time, one time, I want to check it because it never fails that something was missed, especially as you know, in the olden days, it's like the one who speaks of floppies, but in the olden days, there were so many things you had to take into account and a lot of manual configuration. I think software and systems and obviously cloud platforms have eased integration, so to speak. The rise of APIs, that's an entire separate segment that you could have on the vulnerabilities of APIs. The integrations of hardware, software, and systems. You can move a little bit faster, probably be a little bit more cavalier. But I was always encouraging folks, just, on timeline, right? Because projects had deadlines and we wanted to get things done, but kind of push the envelope a little bit, make sure we're exhausting every opportunity within whatever platform or system or service you had. And if you got it in the first time, you probably missed something. So, because invariably, what can we do? So breaking shit and busting stuff. Many of the folks that do. And they know exactly what that phrase means. So we used to say it a lot. It's one of the Paulisms.
Well, let's
not do that again. That's when we broke too much shit and busted too much stuff. It's like, well, let's not do that.
Well, and like behind the scenes, I mean, this is the way I am in life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think today what I broke. I'm not going to say it yet because my wife hasn't found out. But yeah, I broke some things today. I actually just came back. That's why I was running a little bit late today. I came back from Costco to get one of my tires repaired because I had blown another tire.
Okay. I just got my tire replaced yesterday.
Well, I just replaced one because the tires are new, but I'm the kind of guy I forget. I don't know if I forget or I just like drive places where I don't think I'm supposed to drive. It's Mexico too. So it's like, where are you supposed to drive around here? I don't know. And I have a pickup truck and it's big. And so people get out of the way and I drive over things. And then, I get out of the truck and go do my thing. I come back to the truck and my tire's flat. I'm like, son of a bitch.
Yep. Well, at least
what's that?
At least you got Costco.
How much now, if you were to guess, how much would it cost for you to take my tire off, take it off the rim, repair it, put it back on the rim, put it back on my truck, and then put my spare back for me? How much would you charge me for that?
If I was a dealership, I bet you probably don't get in and out of that. If it's not where you got the tire from and they don't have like some deal on free repair, 85 to 120.
Yeah. And I did not buy my tire. It's a 2003 truck. So I haven't even replaced tires on this thing. It cost me 80 pesos, which for people, the conversion rate right now is about 20 to 1. So it's $4.
Okay. Yeah. You're not going to get that.
$4.
I'm
like, man,
I don't think I could come over to your house and do it for $4. I think the beer that I would drink would be more.
Right. I almost want to go pop some more tires.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
But going back to like breaking stuff, shit happens, right? And I think in our industry, there's so many things that happen and there's so many things you kind of don't know unless you broke it, unless you break it and try to put it back together again. That's how you really learn how to fix things, right? So you're Paul. Now, how do you say your last name? What's the right way? Is it Veeneman or Veeneman? Yeah,
there you go. Right there, Veeneman. So
Veeneman. All right.
The short.
So for the listeners, this is Paul Veeneman, and this is a guy that I respect. He's a guy that works his ass off. I wonder, do you have a life outside of information security?
I don't know. People always wonder, like, what do you do? And so a lot of the people I hang out with, like you said, like ending up at, that happy hour and stuff. So a lot of the events and places I go outside of work happen to be somehow tied in, whether it's the nonprofits or the boards I'm on or the events, like a lot of the ones that you go to as well. A lot of the amazing people here in the Twin Cities that are part of the cybersecurity and information technology community, they have become, a lot of personal contacts and friends of mine. So I think when you love what you do, I think you agree with this because I think you're a big proponent and believer in this. If you love what you do, then it's really not even work, and you probably find yourself doing too much of it. So I don't think that I wouldn't say, well, all right. So my wife, Jeannie, who I love and adore, would disagree on the work-life balance. I think it's gotten better. She might agree with that it's gotten better. But it was always moving from one puzzle to the next, right? And trying to figure out what those things are and being in different industries. So whether it was healthcare, finance, insurance, manufacturing, which is where I really got bitten by a bug and just found it immensely interesting in terms of the melding of like physical and logical technology with what's going on in the physical realm. And then moving into, engineering and supporting critical infrastructure, starting out with Class 1 railroads and working with amazing people there. And it hasn't mattered where I've been and what industry I've been. There's been the undercurrent of information technology, and it's been extraordinarily rewarding. It's had its, significant challenges. I think I've grown too. I've told stories, a lot of people either in mentorship or in just helping them achieve what they have. I did go through a period of some professional immaturity where you get a little bit ahead of your press clippings because you are really good at what you do. And
I'm still in that. I'm still in.
But karma and life have a way of coming back and kind of knocking you into place and saying, hey, and if you're there to listen, and you absorb it, then you find center again, right? You find balance. And I think what really is rewarding, Evan, is, and I see this a lot in you, is it's not only learning and achieving for myself, but helping others achieve and really enjoying the success of the lives that you impact along the way. Even if it's talking to a group, it's some of the great, whether traveling abroad for conferences or speaking here locally or even nationally, and imparting, if just one person is able to make an improvement in whether it's their technology, their sector, their industry, their organization, then that's good, right? I mean, that's what fills up. That's what fills the tanks.
Yeah. Well, that's cool, man. And so how long ago did you get involved in, how long ago was it when information security became your career?
By trade, so I was a fine arts major and then switched over in my freshman year.
I was a geology major.
See? It's funny the different walks that we have where it's odd the number of stories that I've heard of people that, in an industry that we really shouldn't even be in. But
do you know why? You want to know why I was a geology major?
Do tell.
Well, it's kind of a funny story. So I was, people don't realize I was a 2-time state champion swimmer, 65, 80, I don't know, maybe 90 pounds ago now. So I swam at the University of Minnesota, which is a Division I, school on scholarship. But I've always been ADHD. I've been a hacker all my life before we even kind of talked about that stuff because my parents were, technology people too. And so I went to the university. I didn't know what I wanted to do for my life. I just figured, hey, I can party and stuff. And so that's what I did. And then I kept putting off. I've always been a procrastinator. In Division I athletics, you have dedicated tutors, dedicated advisors. You have like dedicated everything, right? And you get to go and register for classes 2-3 weeks ahead of the general people, because you have to work around these schedules and everything for competitions and whatever. So anyway, my counselor or my advisor kept saying, hey, what's your major? You have to declare. I'm like, I don't know. And I kept putting it off. Well, then it came down. She says, if you don't give me your major by next week, you will lose your scholarship.
So it was a rash.
And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. So I went back. So I said, what are my choices? I don't even know what the hell. What can I do? And so she gave me a list and said, all right, I'll take this back to my roommates and, talk it over. I don't really know much about these, majors and everything. And then I'll choose one. Right. So I went and I'm sitting with my roommates and we're drinking beers, going through this list. And we came to geology. And one of my roommates said, holy shit, man, I got a buddy of mine who's in that major. It's awesome. I'm like, tell me about it. And he's like, well, for your field studies, you go out and dig up rocks all day and you party all night. And I'm like, there you go. That's my major. So then that was my majored in geology. Anyway, so you majored in
fine arts.
Fine arts. What is a fine art? What's an unfine art?
Yeah, fine arts is where you're. It's tapestry, oils, canvas, acrylics, leads, pastel.
Oui. That sounds French. Was it French?
Yeah. So I loved art. That's probably, other than technology, that's my other pursuit. But fine arts wasn't for me. So I went to at Clark University in Dubuque, Iowa. I went to my teacher's mentor, a guy by the name of Mike Acton, who was the dean of the communications school at the time. And I told him, I said, Mike, I don't think I want to be a fine arts major. And so we kind of talked it over. And he said, well, we have the communications school, and it's marketing, advertising, public relations, and graphic arts. He said, you still get some of the art. And then we, round that out with basic, communications, marketing, and advertising. He goes, there's one thing you can do, Paul, it's talk. So I think you'll do well there. So I was okay. So I did that, finished out, and I was back here in the Twin Cities, and I was looking for advertising marketing job, and it's a tough market to get into in any era. I mean, it's always just really tight. And I happened to pick up a temp job with interim temp agency for an organization called Health Risk Management, and it was supposed to be from June to August. And I got placed there. My job was to go around and get, and it was in the IT department, about 30 people. And my job was to get all the serial numbers off of the CPUs and the monitors to and that would be entered into what was going to be a first inventory management system.
What year would this have been?
This would have been 95. And the gentleman that was doing this database, his name was Scott Schumacher, and he was kind of the lead in along with Dave McCardle and Ray Baczynski. In the desktop support group. And then Schumacher went to Detroit Lake, start a hobby farm. He left. And that's where the project was to get spun down. And Claudette Paris, she was there. She was a team lead, and she said they're going to spin this down. So I said, well, I'd work with Scott, and I could probably put together some of this and kind of build out this inventory management database. And they said, oh, Access 2.0? I said, yeah, I didn't know it. So I went into the back room and I pulled out
people still don't know what that is, by the way.
I know.
So
back in that day, I mean, you got like a book, like a packet would come with the CD-ROM, or the floppy.
What the fuck is Access 1.0? Nobody knows.
So anyway, I went to Barnes & Noble when they still had books there.
Wait, you're talking about the database?
Yes.
Okay, I do know what that Access is. I thought some other kind of weird next-gen Access we were talking about. All right.
So it was, so I'd figured out that I probably bit off a little bit more than I could chew. And long story short, I was able to, in a very short period of time, read through the book. So the Access 2 Bible and Access Unleashed, I think it was, and was able to finish out the program. Scott had really done the majority of the work. All I had to do was create some of the front. And there was this, Jim, there was a guy by the name of Jim Raymond there who was also really good at Access, and he helped me out. And so it was this collective effort. We got the inventory management system in, and they were impressed with, because I was paid from 8 to 5 on the contract, and I was coming in at like 6:30 and leaving at 7 p.m. So, and they said, wow.
Thus the wife saying, hey, work-life balance. I get it. Yeah.
So anyway, they offered me a position there. I started in the desktop level, and then continued up through, and really got to know some amazing people. There's still relationships that I have with a lot of the folks from that IT department, and I would say that I can look back and most of the folks I talk to on a consistent basis throughout the year, I'd say two or like a third of them are probably from those early years, but that was it. So suddenly found myself in an industry. So it's healthcare. It was an amazing experience. Left there and then went to the Doherty Financial Group. That's where I met my wife, and was part of a great team in finance, and then went into Purity Consulting for about 4 years, and then went to a chemical manufacturer actually here in town, Hawkins Incorporated, amazing company, great company. And but learned a lot, through those years. Had a brief stint, about 1.5 years, 2 years at Hayes Companies, which is now Brown & Brown. They're purchased by Brown & Brown Insurance, and work with some, really amazing people that have been lifelong friends as well.
I wonder why they call it brown and brown. Why don't you just call it brown?
Brown, yeah, Browns, right. So anyway, we're deviating from kind of where we wanted to be on.
No, this is my life.
Yeah.
And
so
there's no script. So this is, to me, it's fascinating because one of the things we do too much, I think, just in life in general, is we're too damn transactional.
Yeah.
We're not relational enough. So we jump to conclusions. We think we know somebody. You rush to judgment, but so somebody explaining it back, and you never know when it's going to resound. Yeah, maybe that's the right word, with somebody. Somebody will see themselves in your story resonate. There you go.
Resonate.
See, you were a communications major. I was a rock major. I think I just got hit with too many rocks is what happened.
Kick rocks. But no, so
I've kicked them. That hurts.
I think in addition to loving technology and being really passionate about it, I've been fortunate enough, because this isn't always the case. I mean, working with, no matter where I was at, or regardless of the industry or the engagement, amazing people, right? And then I think you're absolutely right. In fact, a lot of that, when we're talking about IT and OT and how those things are different, and I think communication, what is it? Laswell's law is like, who delivers what message to whom via what medium. I think it's, and then you could also say walk a mile in someone else's shoes. I think that's really when we talk about IT versus OT, and it shouldn't even be versus. It's getting IT and OT at the table. If you can,
well, here's the thing. There ain't no way I'm walking a mile.
Yeah. But you can relate, you can be relatable, right? I mean, you can have conversations and get to understand, like your inquisitive nature about, so, like what's Paul's history and how did he end up, what makes him, a piece of what he is. That would be kind of the same thing about what is it about, those engineers or those process or asset owners on the other side. And then how can you bridge that gap, right? That bridge between two, but being able to bridge that gap and communicate in a common vernacular. Because I think that's really, when we talk about what's the breakdown between the two, it's they both have their principles, right? Like IT is about the confidentiality and protection of data. And on the OT side, asset and process control in those process control environments is safety first. Then we want reliability of our systems, and then we want productivity of the systems, right? And sometimes you can have availability, but it's not like recovery and redundancy. It's availability is uptime, because downtime costs money and uptime is profitability and productivity. And those things can sometimes be opposing forces, but need to work together, especially now where you're seeing a lot more integration of the mountains of data and what would be like the historian data inside the OT environment that has vast informational value to business analytics and in the enterprise itself. So we want to get that data out of there. And that's what's led to IT/OT convergence is a polarizing trigger phrase, and no bones about it. But there are ways
is awesome.
There are ways to get information. There's ways to get that information out. I usually try to say like IT/OT collaboration. I've always maintained, and this is probably incorrect, but this is, for me, I think it was like in the Caesar 80s, when we took analog signal and put it in a TCP wrapper as a packet payload and stuck it on the wire on an Ethernet network. That's when we converge. Now it's an oversimplification, right? But that is at its truest form or purest form. That's probably the point of convergence. Convergence means a lot to a lot of people, and it can be a trigger. But I don't want
triggers.
Now, I don't want to say
let's talk about what other triggers we can find.
Yeah. I think it's, as I said, like lack of understanding, and people start to take, because folks are going to be very passionate, good engineers on either side, but folks that are passionate about the technology or passionate about their process are going to take things personally, right? I mean, because these are their babies. This is the stuff that they work on. So when IT has a requirement to patch, let's say, in vulnerability management, and then they come into the OT space and they say, hey, you've got some Windows workstations, engineer workstations, we need to patch and upgrade those. Engineers get upset because they, it can impact their ability to use the engineering software correctly to be able to interact with the control system. So other triggers are like patch updates, because monthly patching can oftentimes be toxic to the OT environment. In fact, Joe Weiss and I were at the Houston Security Conference, and we did a presentation that was specifically about OT security when the cure is worse than the disease. I mean, that's where the blanket application of IT cybersecurity methodology to OT environments can have a drastic impact, right? And in some cases, it can extend from nuisance all the way to catastrophe and downtime. So,
You know what we need? Some convergence.
convergence, right. So you got to have some convergence.
We're going to use the triggers.
Use the trigger.
Well, so stepping back a little bit, did you grow up in Minnesota?
Predominantly, right? So I think it was in Cincinnati, Ohio, until the summer in between first and second grade. And then we moved here and been here ever since. Never really got used to the cold. I like the last winter was amazing. Loved it. But I think
You want to come to Mexico?
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
You're welcome to come anytime you want.
Next podcast we do, we'll just do it side by side.
Yep. We can do it in our swimsuits on the beach or by the pool if you want.
Okay.
So where did you go to high school?
Holy Angels, Academy of Holy Angels, right there in Richfield.
I went to Minnetonka. What year did you graduate?
90.
All right. I was 88.
Yep. So, in fact,
That's interesting.
I still involved with the school. I go over there, talk to the STEM students every now and then when they ask to have somebody come in, an ex-student, a part of the Holy Angels community, come in and talk to them and share, experiences and kind of what that path looks like and what's next. And then also currently working on, in fact, the athletic director, Dan Woods, my coach and football, Coach Woods, I owe them updates on the logo, so the mascot.
All right. Did you play any sports in high school?
Yep, played football there. Yep, played football.
Okay.
Had great.
What was your position?
Played in on the line, and then let's get.
I played linebacker. I really liked linebacker. I felt like an assassin. It was fun. Yeah. It was always trying to, looking for, where's the gap? Where are they coming? And then making sure you stay in your position and plug that hole. That was a lot of fun.
It was a good time. It was some good years. I still have some good friends. Keep in contact with.
Are you still a sports fan?
Yeah, it's so much. I watch a football game, but it's more the technical side of it, like watching the plays. I wouldn't say I'm a fanatic. I will get upset when you see, like football specifically, when they try to make it a little bit too complicated, but it is a complicated game. I mean, I'm a, armchair quarterback, I guess at best, but
yeah. I have some friends who I love my Wisconsin friends.
Yeah.
Because they're full of shit, which is fun. Because like this weekend, I was watching the Gophers, play football. I watch more I like the quality of the product. I don't like shitty games. I don't like lazy, I don't like when you watch hockey, if your feet aren't moving, you're standing around. Those kinds of games really piss me off because it's like, man, get out there and win. But Minnesota was playing Wisconsin last weekend and we won 24-7. And I had a friend of mine who's a Badgers fan and he was poking shit at me. And I'm a social engineer. I enjoy social engineering. So I turned it around on him where I was like cheering for the Badgers. I'm like, yeah, man, the Gophers suck. Yeah, I think the Badgers are totally going to take this thing. I mean, come on, right? Which totally disarms his ability to get under my skin because.
Suppose, yeah.
And then as the Gophers were just kicking the Badgers' ass, I kept texting him like, there's still time left, man. I think we got this. I think the Badgers are going to come back and take this, which then became jabs at him, which was a lot of fun. I like doing that with my Badgers fans, my Badgers friends and my Packers friends. The Packers are playing the Lions tonight, right now, as we speak. And so, yeah, I don't really give a shit, but it's cool anyway. So one of the things you said early on, I took a note. You said, bite off more than you can chew.
Oh, yeah.
Biting off more. Do you just need a bigger mouth for that? Do you think?
I don't think anyone would ever have. I've never been accused of having a small mouth, I suppose. But
right.
So
we're always biting off more than you can chew. Isn't that part of growth, though, too? So you started in this industry. What you said about 95?
Yep, 95.
And I've always found myself in places where I question why I'm there. Meaning, I've always felt like, holy shit, I've never been here before. I'm not qualified for this. All the way from many of the breaches I've been involved in over the years. Now, I don't talk a lot about the things I've done over the years because I don't really care to. I'm not an ego guy, so I don't really give a shit if you know about it or not. But there's been lots of times in my career I've kind of pinched myself like, holy shit, I can't believe I'm here right now. I think the biggest one, the first time that really slapped me upside the head was the Target breach.
Okay.
Because for some reason, and I still don't know why the hell they chose me, but do you know this story at all?
No.
Okay.
I know the story, the Target
story. The breach. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this would have been December 2015, 13. Sorry. So I found out it happened. The reason why it sticks out so much too is it was my birthday. I was out to having dinner with my family, and I get a call from Care 11 News. Can't remember the guy's name, but he's like, Target breach, blah, blah, blah. Can you come into the studio for an interview? And I hadn't even heard about it yet. I was like, sure, I'll come in. So I get on my phone. I'm calling friends. I'm like, what the fuck happened at Target? And they're like, well, yeah. And they're telling me all this. I'm like, okay, cool. So I go there, and then, so long story short, bunch of shit happens, bunch of TV interviews. And the whole time I'm like, why me? Why the fuck are you guys talking to me? And so I guess, I don't know who gave him my name, probably, you probably don't want me to know that. So then there's a lot of lawsuits that happen in these breaches, right? Many lawsuits. And they usually bring them together, class actions and stuff. One of the lawsuits that's fairly common in a public company after a big breach it's called a derivative action. And it's where the shareholders file suit against the board of directors. So in essence, it's Target suing Target. That's what it is. So when that happens, the court appoints an impartial body of lawyers and people to investigate the charges, the alleged charges, and then make a recommendation back to the court on whether or not they should proceed, whether there's any merit here. And so that group that they assemble, it's called the Special Litigation Committee. And it's a very powerful committee. It's like a big deal. I had no idea any of this stuff. I didn't know anything, right? Well, I get a call from Kathleen Blatz, not her in particular, her people. Kathleen Blatz is like the former state Supreme Court Chief Justice or some shit. I don't know. They're like, yeah, we'd like to interview you for this thing. And they're explaining to me what it is. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll be there. So I get there, and the dean of the University of Minnesota Law School is there, just like these big, powerful lawyer people. And I'm super intimidated. And this John was his name, John something. He's this dean from the Minnesota Law School guy. And he says, are you a lawyer? I'm like, nope.
Stay at a Holiday Inn Express line.
Nope. So I'm like, I went to your school, but I majored in geology and I was drunk most of the time. So no, not a lawyer. I mean, most lawyers are probably drunk, but that, whatever. That's about as close as I get. And he's like, well, then why do you give legal advice? Like, when the fuck did I give legal advice? Well, you wrote a blog post about, I wrote a blog post about negligence. And it was just my opinion, right? And so he pointed that out. He goes, why do you give this legal advice? And I'm like, dude, those are just thoughts, man. I feel like I'm going to get sued now or something. He's like, well, your advice was actually pretty good. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Again, why I'm trying to figure out why I'm here, and they're explaining all this stuff. And then, I leave and I'm like super, super intimidated. I feel like I'm about this big, because it's 2013. So I'd been in the industry for, 20 something years by then, but still, this is way out of my league. I'd never done anything like this. And then they called me a couple days later and they said, we'd like to invite you to be on the Special Litigation Committee. I'm like, okay, what does that entail and everything? And so it's all lawyers, these big, high-powered, super lawyers and me. There's no other security person there. I don't have any friends there. There's no peers there. So I'm trying to fit in with these guys. I'm trying to buddy up to them. No, they don't want to buddy up to me. They have a different language. They have a different sense of humor. Like I would say a joke to kind of loosen things up, and they'd all look at me like I'm stupid. So then okay. And then they would make a joke and they'd all be laughing. And I'm like, I didn't get that at all. So it was just so weird. But anyway, it was 14 of intense interviews. I was the guy that consulted them on what questions to ask, like, Beth Jacobs, who was the CIO at the time, Steinhoffel was the CEO. So it was kind of cool because I could like ask these difficult questions, but I didn't have to be the guy asking them.
Mm-hmm.
And then all along, and this was crazy too, because I had to teach these lawyers like networking, basic. And I've always been a network guy, so that was fine, but like simple, because what was so key to that case was network segmentation and network isolation, because they came in through, single factor authentication on that vendor portal. They got into the extranet, and from the extranet, they compromised. Well, we're not sure, but it looked like they compromised an old version of, anyway, in, and just kept pivoting and got their way into. So that was really key to the case. It was a crazy story, but it was one of those times where I'm sitting there and I'm like, the hell? I mean, why me? Why am I here? I mean, there's lots of people that are qualified, probably more qualified than I am to be here. It was crazy. Then they asked me how much before we got involved. They're like, what's your rate? I'm like, what's your rate? They're like, well, why is that important? I go, why am I important? I don't know. They're like, well, and they told me $450 an hour. And I said, that's my rate. They went with it. So that was cool. Back in 2013, that was good money.
It's good money, man. It's good money.
And all along, they kept asking me, in my opinion, would this be negligent? And I pointed back to that time when John asked me at the beginning, am I a lawyer? I'm like, I'm not qualified to tell you. In my opinion, yes, it's absolutely negligent. There's negligence throughout this breach over and over and over again. Left hand wasn't talking to right hand. You talk about convergence. There, it wasn't IT/OT, it was governance and IT. You had governance, policy, all this bullshit over here, compliance. You had technology, IT, and those two did not talk to each other. And so it was broken throughout. I thought it was 100% negligent. The recommendation back to the court was not to proceed. The basis for that and it's the same basis you run into with IT/OT. It's the same damn thing we're running into today. They kept asking, well, okay, what they did was wrong, but you've worked in other organizations and seen stuff. Is this similar to what other organizations do? And I'm like, yeah. I mean, everybody's got this fucking wrong. And
yep.
That's the basis for essentially for negligence. If you're in the herd, even though the herd is running off the cliff, if you're in the herd, you're not negligent. Our legal system is completely fucked. And all this stuff permeates over to this IT/OT, in my opinion. At the root of all of this is accountability. Who's accountable? And we keep pointing fingers at each other, like OT folks, the engineers, IT, leadership, government. Nobody's stepping up. What do you think about that?
I think there's some truth to that. People, again, if we look optimistically, that folks do want to do the right thing.
I'm not an optimist.
Not an optimist? Okay. We can look at it pessimistically as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think the biggest problem that we have is, so I'll hit this from 3 points of view. So one is everyone starts with purchasing a solution first. So we're always hitting cybersecurity first. That's the output. So I go someplace, I go to a consultant, and a lot of the MSPs are geared towards sales of products. They do have the services, but sometimes they're aligned to a product or a platform that solves a particular situation. But how do I know what that is? I'm either, if I don't know what like in the case of OT specifically, if I don't know what my assets are and what those asset dependencies are within the process environment or in my production environment, then I can't really determine what the risks are. And a risk profile for an OT environment is vastly different than an IT environment because we have this cyber physical condition that we have to take into consideration. We try to use different tools or different things. And by tools, I should maybe say methods. We try to use methods and try to figure out what those risks are. But if an organization doesn't know what their engineering or process control system or environment assets are, then there's no real way that you can know what the risks are. If you don't know what the risks to those assets are, then how are you going to apply the risk mitigation? The risk mitigations are the cybersecurity at back end. A risk mitigation can be, like, as everybody knows, to be organizational. So it could be like a policy or a procedure or a plan or something like that. It could be documentation. A lot of times we see the policies are just made just to check a checkbox and make sure that we've got that done. But but if I'm trying to solve for something, what I want to make sure is that I understand how do all my assets function within the OT environment, because I could have a PLC, right? And then I could have that connected to downstream IEDs or RTUs, HMIs. So integrated electronic device via an IED or a remote terminal unit via RTU. I could have a human
PLC, programmable logic controller.
Programmable logical controllers. That's kind of the big daddy that it took. And for all the asset owners and controls engineers out there, I'm going to oversimplify this, so, give some latitude.
But that's totally cool, man, because you have to think, I mean, one of the things I think we do so much in this industry is we speak this different language and people don't understand what the hell we're saying.
But if we know what the assets are and we know what the dependencies are and the relationships, then we can figure out what the risks are. And usually start with like, what is my physical access control or physical risk, right? Because somebody could just walk up to a control panel. Or you talk about negligence, let's say. Does the control panel have a lock on it? Yep. Does it have a working key? Yep. And why is it never locked? Well, it's because it's inconvenient. Okay.
Or why is the key still in the lock?
Yeah. So convenience undoes, as you know, security 100% of the time. Convenience is undefeated against security. But as long as we can start taking a look at that, and then there's also ways to categorize devices. Now, folks may have heard of the Purdue Enterprise Reference Architecture, which is more based on time. It's been kind of, I don't want to bastardize, it's a hard term, but we can say that. So IT people like to take the Purdue Enterprise Reference Architecture and liken it or make it something akin to like the OSI layers. And it's not really layers like this. It's where we're taking process components and we're cataloging them into spaces. So am I going to take all my PLCs and throw those into one network? No, what I'm going to do is take the PLCs and what processes that those are governing over, maybe with also the other devices on a particular network. And what I can do, because the Common Industrial Protocols, or the CIP, are absent of authorization and authentication, right? They also don't have any levels of encryption. So what am I using for compensating controls to do that? And you talked about in the negligence with Target is that isolation segmentation was absent. So in the OT space, I may take a PLC and the connected devices that work all the way down to the sensors, right? So when we talk about the field bus level, so that would be sensors and devices, those sensors, actuators, pumps and valves. What I'll do is I'll group those in a particular process run or a process, so to speak. And it could be fluid flow, it could be electric distribution, it could be electric transport, it could be energy, oil, it really doesn't matter, manufacturing. The goal is that I may have several groupings, like in a manufacturing facility, where it's the same run. I've got 4 or 5 lanes, the same product production, but what I want to do is isolate those. So if I were to put all my PLCs into one network, I do have a risk, and every organization is going to assess the risk for their environment based on cost and productivity and efficiency, right? So I can create a VLAN and put all those devices into one VLAN. Then I can isolate that VLAN and maybe protect it with access control lists. Maybe I can put a firewall in between the enterprise IT network and the OT networks, okay? And when I do that, I'm going to restrict access into those OT environments, okay? When I do that, what I'm trying to do is limit the exposure. So if I can limit the exposure, that's what I can do. And what we want to do is take a look at what the crown jewels are. So if I know what my assets are, and if I know what those OT components are, then I can assess the risks and the criticality of those systems, and I can isolate and segment. And then the last piece is, and this is where IT can really start to help and play a role, is we have IT assets operating in the OT environment, right? So I may have an engineering workstation. The engineering workstation is the linchpin. The engineering workstation is the station that a process or an asset owner is using that has software that is specifically loaded to talk to the PLC and load a program and interact with the process itself in the physical world. And when that system is compromised, whether by threat, inside actor, or it could just be a human error or something, but if the engineering workstations are compromised, then you have everything you need to bring significant impact to the OT environment. Well, a lot of these are Windows-based. And a lot of these have to have, we have to maintain updates, but I can't run this update because it's going to ruin this application, which won't be able to talk to that PLC. And there's all these downstream dependencies. But if I can practice layered defense to those engineering IT asset workstations and have, let's say, and this is where CISA gets in. A lot of times the knock against CISA is they're far too network or IT centric in their prescription for defense. But here's where it could work. Can I have multi-factor authentication against a Windows workstation that is the engineering workstation? Yes. Can I have endpoint protection? Yes. Can I have a local firewall there that protects it? Yes. So there are IT things that we can do on an IT asset operating the OT network that isn't going to impact, like you can see over my shoulder here, this PLC right here. So I can't hit that with a typical IT scanner because I run the risk of tipping that over. That's a risk. So what I want OT developed solutions for my asset management and continual monitoring that are not like an IT system or a tool that I would use for IT assets. But once I get up into a layer where I've got, or a grouping of systems that are Windows based and more like IT assets in the OT networks, now I can start to bring in some of the mature practices that we have on the enterprise IT side. And I think that's where the two groups, OT and IT, the technologists and the practitioners and the engineer and the process and asset owners can work together to understand the challenges that each face and then come together and understand what that, here's what we need to do. Because if I can ensure the integrity of a Windows or Linux-based engineering workstation or the SCADA system, then that is half the battle when you're talking about OT networks.
Yeah. Well, as a guy, so what is it? Let me ask you this. Is this what you do today?
It is, yeah, some kind of a mixed bag or a lot of stuff, but I focus on a lot of the manufacturing side or the it could be critical infrastructure, it could be water, wastewater, work with municipalities, it could be oil and gas, renewables, and building secure architectures for wind farms and solar farms, and working with some large national or international organizations that are deploying these. Yeah, so, and I have a lot of opportunities to work with those OT engineers and impart to that, understand what are they trying to accomplish? What are the challenges that they face? And now how can I work in risk mitigations in order to ensure the uptime and the safety of their components and their operation?
So for somebody who's not super familiar with OT, what's an OT engineer? What's their primary responsibility? What do they do?
A lot of times, so they're going to build like process logic, or they're going to be operating with like a PLC is a purpose built.
So it's not an operator. It's somebody who is more of an architect, more builds and designs, implements.
I would say at the level of, I'm going to try to explain this. So a controls engineer or a process owner that is working on let's say a lot of times the code or the software that you use to put a program into, or a project, as they may say, into a PLC, which is going to be whatever it does, it's going to repeat it over and over and over and over and over again as it builds widgets or moves, fluid or generates electricity or distributes electricity, let's say. There is a level of minutia that you have to get through. Like I use this example earlier today when I was talking with the group and I was on one side of the conference room and I said, okay, so a process engineer that would build out the logic for me to walk across the room and then walk out the door. I said, it would be everything about the individual stands up. That's one step. Shifts weight forward. That's one step. Takes a step forward. That's one step. Shifts weight forward more. As with that step, the second foot starts to come off. So you get into this, if you were to take frame by frame, my entire movement across the floor, this is the level of detail that a process engineer goes through as they build in the logic that will get loaded in. And everything is on a time sequence. This happens, then this happens, and a couple of things may happen here. And I'm watching what's happening over here while I'm doing this. There's a level of detail that control systems engineers get to, and they have to also be aware of the physical electronics that are going on. Like that's why a lot of times electrical engineers like who goes to a 4-year degree in electrical engineering, become controls engineers. Now, like organizations such as Dunwoody have a 2-year automation, and they do an amazing job there in the industrial controls and automation. E.J. Daigle is the dean of that school over at Dunwoody Technical College, and I work with those folks a lot, and they're absolutely amazing. They can get folks set for a 2-year, and there's a lot of graduates here in the Twin Cities that have gone to be exceedingly successful, but the level of detail that they get to in order to have something digitally take place in the physical world, in the let's just say manufacturing. This is why the smallest little hiccup in terms of time can have drastic impact to a process if it is affecting the PLC. Right? So imagine if I told you, it'd almost be for us, it'd be like a procedure. So I want to set up a Windows workstation. Give me the click for click, the mouse click for mouse click, keystroke for keystroke, screen for screen on taking a Hyper-V virtual machine that is going to end up being a Linux system with 4 partitions, a network interface, and communicating on that network to get it to where I could ping it. And I want the documentation of the procedures to be so detailed that I could give it to somebody in accounting and they could end up with the same product. That's what an engineer does. They engineer everything down to that level of detail. And that's why they take a lot of pride. They take a lot of...
The reality is, the same thing happens in IT. And I don't think people realize that. Computers only do what you tell them to do. They don't think
Correct.
For themselves. They
Same
only do...
PLC.
Exactly. You give them a computer, because a PLC is a computer, right? You have to give it instructions to carry out some thing, whatever you want to accomplish. And hopefully you've designed it in a way that you've got an end result, a goal in mind. And along the path of designing and building, you're thinking of all these contingencies. You're thinking, well, what if, because you have to build that in. And I think a lot of IT people, because this is the part where it's kind of a pet peeve of mine, is that we treat these like they're separate. They are somewhat separate. They've got separate goals, but they're, at the end of the day, it's all technology. One is really focused on it's pretty literal. If you struggle with the difference between IT and OT, just use the literals, right? IT, information technology, right? So it's really focused on processing, storing, transmitting information. That's what IT does. OT, operational, right? So think of operations, think of making things happen, movements, valves, opening and closing, those types of things. And the primary objective for OT is to control and monitor physical processes and systems. Both super important. And when you take an information security perspective on this, information security is protecting, it is CIA, right? Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And when you look across your entire environment, your entire technology environment, whether it's IT or OT or them together, whatever the scope is, you can't treat anything in your environment like it's like everything else, because it isn't like everything else. Every system does something different, right? If you don't know what that system does, go find out. The biggest thing you can do around all information security is situational awareness. You have to understand the situation. You have to understand what's going on, whether it's IT or OT. In the IT environment, so I've got systems that maybe aren't specifically controlling any physical processes or anything. There are still systems in my IT environment where the criticality of the availability is the biggest goal. And then in some cases like banking, ledger systems, accounting systems, integrity. Super duper important. That's usually the trump, right, on that one. And if I've got PII, databases, things like that, then confidentiality trumps. But it's always this handoff, trade-off between confidentiality, integrity, and availability across everything, IT or OT.
Now, that's where you'd lose me, because on the OT side, I don't have very little data integrity concerns, right? So
no, you have to, because what happens if you're giving the wrong instructions?
Well, let's say the ladder logic, and that's probably a little bit of a dated term, but I would have the ladder logic that's the instruction. I can have It could be,
as an attacker, it would be really awesome to get in, be man in the middle, and change the data integrity.
Okay, so I can, and that's why I was talking about the engineer workstation. So let's say if I can compromise, so if I get access to a network and I'm talking to a PLC, but I don't have, all I have is the IP address of a PLC. Now, so there's the example like the facing of the Unitronics PLCs and Aliquippa. That's where they just opened up, the ports right off the internet, right? That's a little different. But if I'm moving laterally, if I'm a threat actor and I happen to stumble upon a PLC, there's only so much I can do with that PLC. If I get to an engineering workstation, now I have the software, the capability to maybe alter the ladder logic or the code, and then I can upload a different program if I've compromised the account. Because if I've compromised the machine, there's really probably not, although there's the capability for passwords and accounts on a PLC, it's not what you would think. It's not like a Windows workstation or Active Directory, and there's no multi-factor authentication to a PLC. So the data that's important can be how we do something in the physical realm. So where we get close to data confidentiality in the OT space could be, is our manufacturing process, like the mix for Coke, right, or Pepsi, there's within the physical realm or within the logic for like mixes and mix tanks, if you were to be able to exfiltrate how the manufacturing process for Coke takes place, you may be able to some degree, reverse engineer and figure out the intellectual property of the Coke recipe. Now I'm using a broad general example here. So, but it would be how we do something in the physical realm and the logic that an engineer would create to do such a thing. The manufacturing shop floor may represent a market advantage for that organization. So the ability to exfiltrate that out, that would be something. But think about electricity, wastewater, water. So some of those critical infrastructure, something aside from manufacturing. What we do in those spaces is pretty routine. The data that's maybe of value could be the history of the efficiency or the productivity or the outputs. And that's what they call like the local historian and getting that data out. But I'm not so much worried about the data integrity or the confidentiality. What I'm worried about is uptime, productivity, and safety. Safety first and foremost.
Oh yeah, safety is definitely safety. And and it's not that, everything, if you take a look like three buckets, right? Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. In some cases, the confidentiality bucket is full. Integrity bucket, maybe a little bit. Availability, not. There's, because I think one of the struggles, and I'm thinking, and I'm talking more from a security person's perspective. If I were the CISO, let's say, you certainly have specialized skill sets, specialized things in your environment that do things. What's not helpful from a security person's perspective, and certainly a management's perspective, is to treat these things like they're separate. We have to have integration because they are integrated. We have to figure out these communications between things. If we know that OT systems, their primary thing is availability and safety, for sure. Because the same thing applies with IT. There are some IT systems where safety is like number one. Take, school locks, electronic locks on school systems, or which there's a translation there between OT and IT too, by the way.
Well, that's because that's an automated. So the argument could be made that's a security system for a building. That is something that has a controller. So there's a software server controller that holds the prox card accounts and identities, but also that has wired connection to every door lock and magneto like actually or whatever. So and that could be, I would make the argument that the physical building security system is more an OT thing than it is an IT thing. It may have a server somewhere, but this is something that holds logic that is then controlling function and process in the physical world. So you've got the doors that are held open by the mag contacts, and then if they have to close down or lock down the building, there is a signal that is sent and a pulse that hits every door, and it releases the magnet, and then those doors close shut. And when the doors make contact, they lock, right? That is an OT process. And
but it does not work without IT.
Well, it doesn't, but and that's the thing, is that's where I was talking about an engineering workstation, a SCADA server, an HMI could, depending on the level of smarts that it has. You do have, and I say this in the presentations, in the seminars I give, is you have IT systems that are in the OT process environments, and that's examples of those. But I could have 100 doors and contacts and magnet, and I could have one server controlling it all. That would, in a sense, be the PLC, right? So I do have an IT system there, but that's an operational technology process that is going to, and it's the safety. If it doesn't function properly then there's the safety is at risk for the individuals inside that the system is built for. It's like, another aspect of PLCs or the process environment is safety instrumented systems. Safety instrumented systems, or SIS, is the horn and strobe inside an environment and a lot of times these are controlled by a PLC as well, where like in chemical manufacturing, if there's a sensor in the air detects an increase in the level of in the air quality, there's some chemicals under pressure are escaping, like there's a leak, right? And then the sensor understands or senses that the toxicity level in the air quality has reached a high set point, right? So immediately you've got sirens, horns to alert the human counterparts within the environment. There is something that is not right. It is now an unsafe condition. Exit the facility. If there's any type of a compromise to that system, nobody knows, because we are trusting and this is where it's the integrity of a process. But there's, and I could see that, but that is I think a lot of times we talk about safety, and then the OT triad is safety, reliability, and productivity, versus the IT triad, which is, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So I need to know.
I mean, that's not the IT triad. That's the security triad. And I think that's the difference, is we need to marry these things up, because the fact of the matter is, you can't separate safety from information security for these reasons.
But we need to understand, but I think as we're getting, and if we want it all under one umbrella, then we can't miss the fact that there's going to be less of a concern about data from an information technology sense in the environment.
It's all just design. I mean, it would be strictly IT environment. It would be stupid for me to put the same controls over just a simple intranet site versus, our site that has all the customer data in it, right? We wouldn't. And I think today there's a lot of practitioners who would, because honestly, I think there's a lot of practitioners who aren't good at their job. We don't take the time to understand the fucking environment.
Yeah.
And so we treat like, oh, that's OT. I don't give a shit if it's OT. Understand it.
Yep. I agree with that, is that a lot of times even IT people who, if something jacks into a network, then you should probably understand what it is, and you should probably know what the risks are to that device. So if I get a PLC that's connected to a network, I should understand what the risks are to the business for the impact of any type of compromise over the network to that system, even if it's a closed system. So
if IT is going to say, well, CIA, and that's where we get mixed up too. We treat information security like it's an IT issue. It's not an IT issue. It's never been a fucking IT issue. Our biggest risk is people. So how do we fix that with IT? You can't, so it's this runaround.
Yeah.
Because even the IT people, like, okay, so data confidentiality is super important. The fact of the matter is, it's not important everywhere. Because you talk to people, say, about their data classification. What do you do for data classification? What's your data classification scheme? Well, we treat everything like it's confidential. Bullshit. You don't. You have a website. I walked in, I saw, things laying on the desk. Is that confidential? So it's this understanding of, like, we need to classify systems. We need to put systems into categories, much like what you said with the same thing with OT. We can't treat all OT systems the same. They do different things. They have different processes. It's the same damn thing in IT. And I think the reason why we find ourselves in a lot of this mess, I think, one, we're lazy, maybe. lazy and maybe just not skilled, I think. I have, and you have, we have the, I think the gift, I don't know what you call it. Yeah, maybe it's a gift that we grew up with this, right? We came through this, you started in 95, right? That
Yeah. The long,
almost,
it's, I always call it long math versus short math. So we had the long math version. So you did have to know a lot. You had to know a lot. And now this is the age of specialization. And then now we have to go back to where a practitioner in IT has a much broader focus, right? As opposed to.
But the thing is, you can't specialize until you generalize. I think so many people just go right to the specialization and they miss all the basics, all these things, because we run into the same thing when we hire people. Not when we hire people. We're really good at picking them out first. Like pen testers, you can run all the tools. Yay, good for you. You have no idea how TCP/IP works. You can't read a damn packet. You're more dangerous than you are good, for us. And it's the same thing as when you're operating in an IT environment and an OT environment. And this is when I think when I got my first paid job in this industry was cleaning boot sector viruses off of Windows 3 machines. That didn't count because that was just bullshit. That was for IBM. And my mom worked for IBM. I don't like IBM. But then I really liked networking. So in the early 90s, I was a Cisco guy. So I taught CCNP classes. There were 4 at that time. And I loved networking. I still do. And the cool thing about an old guy like me is TCP/IP is still TCP/IP. Thank you for not adopting version 6. Because version 6 looks like it's better for sure, but for an old guy, it looks like clusterfuck to me. I mean, I can say dotted decimal all day long. I can read short pieces of hex. Binary is my jam. You look at IP version 6, it's like, don't get it.
I think you get to a point where you realize the industry is going to pass some of us by.
But the one thing it'll never. But the one thing seriously that it'll never, Paul, it'll never pass us by, is the wisdom.
Oh yeah,
because wisdom is age old. One of my favorite jobs. I worked for Jask Software. Have you ever heard of Jask Software?
No, I don't think so.
We made Paint Shop Pro. You probably heard of that.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So Paint Shop Pro, this was back when it was still .com era, pre-2000 into 2000 a bit. And it was, digital cameras were like exploding, right? Kodak was actually still a company then. And you had 2 options for editing your digital photos. You had Photoshop or Paint Shop Pro. That was it. Photoshop would cost you $1,200. The only thing it really had over Paint Shop Pro is CMYK, whereas we were RGB. But, your layperson doesn't give a shit about that. And it was really cool because for a networking guy back then, and this is another one of those times I look back and I kind of pinch myself. I'm like, what an amazing job. Because our website back then, we were getting 3 million visitors a day. We were always one of the, at that time, we were one of the top 10 most popular websites in the world, which was really cool because I'm the network guy, right? And so we were doing things, we had to figure out problems like, how do you load balance all this stuff? There's no load balancers back then. You try round robin DNS, it doesn't work so well. You tried a bunch of shit with BGP, it was so fun. We clustered SQL 6.5 back then.
Wow.
Nobody ever clustered SQL 6.5. Microsoft couldn't do it, but we hacked the shit. And that's why my first claim to fame amongst my hacker friends was stealing a copy of Windows 95 from Microsoft in late 1993. So nobody else had it. And I was like, oh, I'm so cool. 26 floppies. That's what it took to install that bitch. But anyway, so the thing that was awesome about life then versus life today is I was intimately familiar with everything on that network. I took so much pride in my network that I would get offended at myself. I would be upset with myself if somebody else told me something about my network that I didn't already know.
Mm-hmm.
So if a user called me and said, the network's slow, and I didn't already know that, fuck. Now, we were doing really complicated things for that time. And that's when I really learned that complexity is always the worst enemy. Always. I don't want shit on my network unless it has a specific function that we need And so you'd go through this exercise. The cool thing, good IT people back then and good, because they didn't really call us security people, even though we were, they didn't separate out those functions yet.
Right.
You could always tell the good IT people because they had time on their hands. I played, in the years that I worked at Jask Software, I probably played 6,000-7,000 games of ping pong with my friend Juan.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah. So you fast forward to today, and you take in the wisdom piece here is every environment you see, it's overcomplicated. It's overcomplex. You have systems on this network, whether they're IT systems or OT systems, that you don't know what they do. You don't even have an inventory of them. I've done enough incident responses over the years. I mean, hundreds, now. By far the most common response we get when we're starting and we start, pinpointing and starting getting isolation or containment is, what's that system? We didn't know that. We didn't even know that was there. And every time I'm like, if you just followed the fucking basics,
just know
we wouldn't even be here right now. You wouldn't have been ransomed.
I always lead with whether it's, especially when I'm talking with IT departments in their OT environments. I always tell them the asset management is the key to everything. If you don't know where your asset, you don't know what the dependencies are. If I don't know what the dependencies are, I can't assess my risks. If I don't know what the risks are, what are you buying? You just throwing darts at a dartboard in the dark, trying
Amen,
to...
brother. Amen. And that's so that if I'm the CISO, that's the umbrella.
That's it. Risk. It's a risk focus. What's the risk?
Absolutely. And there's no way I'm ever going to be able to tell you what the risk is if I don't even know what the fuck I'm working with. So if I walk into an environment and I've got, say it's a manufacturing, we've got IT stuff, we've got OT stuff, whatever. Step number one, what is this? What do we have? I need a detailed inventory, and the inventory I need is hardware, software, and data. If we don't want to, we're not going to be able to do data, probably for a couple of years, actually. I mean, if I'm going to be honest with you, but I need all the hardware and I need all the software. And what I'm looking for, and when we're all going to sit down together as a team, and we're all going to explain what the fuck all this shit does. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get rid of all the shit we don't need. We're going to identify a whole bunch of stuff to hear that, like, on the OT side and the IT side, like, nobody's using that anymore.
What is this? Yeah, no one's even using it.
Turn that shit off. Get it out of here. And then what I'm going to do as the CISO, because the language of business isn't any of this shit that we're talking about. The language of business is accounting. The language of business is money. And so as the CISO, because this is a great opportunity for me to earn a whole shitload of political capital with management, I got to manage down and I got to manage up. So we go through this asset inventory. We're going to get rid of all this shit. And I want to know how much all that shit was costing us before and how much it's costing us now. Because then I can go to management and I can say, hey, I just saved us $300,000 this year. I've got friends, over the years, I consult, CISOs. Some of them don't like it because I don't think they like the truth, but I was told that the best way to offend somebody is to tell them the truth. So I keep doing that. He just called me like last week and said, we just saved 35% on our cyber insurance policy because of the work we did. I'm like, you need to go fucking tell the board that. That needs to be like front and center on your, because that's the language they speak. And once I get that political capital and you know what I mean, then we can start talking about risk. We can start, people, in the IT world, and I don't know how much they're talking about this stuff in the OT world, but we talk about zero trust.
Yeah, that's more of a marketing thing. On the OT side, I don't know where that applies. I think you have far more positive impact if you're just understanding your assets, the risks of those assets, the dependencies, and what that means to production. You're mapping directly to the business output, right? And then anything that I'm doing, I have to be able to draw a line to, like, if I'm going to invest in some tool or some platform or some system to protect something, then I need to be able to draw a line to the business need and the business success. What is that objective? And it, is there zero trust somewhere? You can't swing it dead.
And I'm not
an executive team that talks about zero trust. And I understand you have to play the game a little bit, but I think you can have a conversation where it says, Yeah, I understand about zero trust. Take a look at the broad expanse of our technology footprint here and our data. We're trusting an awful lot. So,
Right. No, 100%. And I think because in a perfect way, because zero trust isn't anything new, right? Even though this guy at Forrester came up with the name
John Kennedy.
and then claims that he invented it. No, this has always been the concept. This is always, why would I have two systems talk to each other beyond what they need to talk to each other, right? We've always done this. That's why I get so pissed off about anybody who installs firewalls nowadays, because firewall is designed for ingress and egress. It's not finished until you've properly configured it. And if you only did ingress, now the only way I'm going to figure out egress, and this is the part where people I think get wrapped around the axle, like, oh, it's so much work.
Oh yeah,
but it's going to pay huge dividends because I'm mapping all these communication flows.
I had that discussion with the client today. I said, and I think that's what you were getting to. Least permission or least privilege is not just identity and account management. It has to do with everything that we do. It can be a person and their physical access. It can be a system and what it is allowed to do, a firewall and its protocols and networks. I said, what you want to do is to be able to understand the source and destination for your data, what systems and assets, because a person is an asset, a PC is an asset, a server is an asset, the network is an asset. What assets are coming in contact with that data as it moves through, and what is the least privilege or least permission across those assets to interact with that data that I can restrict to and still allow the business to operate efficiently and with productivity and with profitability. And if you get to that balance, that is when people say, what's the balance between, security and technology? I said, when I can practice least privilege and least permission across all assets and the business is still able to function at the most restrictive setting.
Yeah. Yeah. And
that's
the funny thing.
That's what we call zero trust, because I'm not trusting anything. I'm only giving it the bare minimum to be able to perform its function or role.
Yeah. I mean, if this PLC only needs to talk to this one controller or this one system
on one port, then
why would I
5,535? I'm only allowing 44,818 because that's TCP Ethernet IP 44,818. That's it. Everything else stop. Well, what if something else needs to be there? What are the dependencies? Well, it's an engineering workstation. It's got this other. Then you have to understand what are all the protocols that are necessary, and then only those are allowed. But what if they add another application? Then you have to open up another port. That's a lot of work. Yes, it is, but you'll be better off for it.
Well, and if you stop bitching about how much work it is and be a business enabler versus a business disabler, they'll start inviting you to these design meetings, and you'll know this ahead of time, and you'll be able to plan for it. So you'll have it. If you've done it right, you may have everything already scripted by the time this thing goes into production, where you got to do a couple of clicks and you're done. Because not only does OT need to be process efficient, so does IT.
Yep.
So do all of us, right? I mean, again, going back to the complexity being our biggest enemy, it's so much easier for me to secure 2 things than it is for me to secure 20,000 things. It's easier for me to secure a 2-step process than it is for me to secure a 30-step process. And not only is it harder to secure, but it's also inefficient. It also wastes money. So if you tie it back to the business and you want to speak the language of business, these are all efficiencies. And if you're a security person who can think this way, who can see how IT and OT, they're both unique, but they're not separate. They have to work together.
Agreed. Yeah. Over the years, that'll come about. I think if it starts at the risk level and then you understand what those are, and then you move that's into and if you, to your point, the joy that you had in knowing exactly what was going on in your network, that's a question that I ask a lot of clients. Can you tell me today that you have a firm handle on 100% of the assets that are connected to your network? And they go, no, we don't. It's okay. Well, that's what we're going to work towards, because that's what
started even 50%, I mean, start somewhere.
And that's part of the journey, and you're not putting anyone down because of that, because Like the comment that you had made about Target. It's like, do you see this often in the industry? Yes, like almost 100% of the time. And that's why I try to tell people, it's like, the sky's not falling, but we understand the path that we're on and where we want to get to. And it's out there, but that's what we're going to do. And this is the process that we're going to work through. And you'll get to that point, and it's going to be 80% of work on the front end, 20% on the back end, and you're going to be better off.
Well, and the truth is, if we're creative enough, we can offset any of the cost and disruption with efficiency, right? I don't want to come in here and turn this ship 90 degrees and incur all the costs for that. That's stupid, right? It's, in what ways can we offset? So can we be more secure? So, going back to the reducing complexity, if I can get rid of 50 applications in this environment and 45 pieces of hardware, I have reduced risk significantly. My attack surface is significantly reduced. Those are systems that I no longer need to patch. I no longer need to configure correctly, right? So from the security guy's hat, winning, that's my job. From a business hat, making more money, also a win, right? And I think if people just started there, that'll keep you busy for a while. Once you're done with that, then let's talk about the next thing. The last thing you want to do, because this is, when I talk to IT CIOs, the most common complaint I get is it's so hard to keep up with the unrealistic technology demands of the business. That's what they say. And so, again, I'm the guy that tells you the truth. I think I'm the guy that tells people, I'm the guy that says the thing that everybody's thinking, but nobody wants to say. Because the reason why it's hard for you to keep up with the unrealistic technology demands of the business, if I want to be honest with you, is because you're not good at your job. You're not speaking the language of business, right? And if you want to know how to speak the language of business, look next door in the office next door to you, the CFO. When the CFO says something, the CEO listens, the board listens. When the CEO wants to open another branch in Nebraska, the CFO is like, well, we can't afford it. We need to plan, blah, blah, blah. They listen. What the CIO typically does is just takes orders. You're just an order taker.
Yeah, there's that. I mean, there are those that are more proactive. The ones that understand the business, and they're the ones that are going and saying, we need to take this technology and put this to work for us, because they're a CIO that understands the business is usually ahead of the curve. The CEO isn't coming to them. They're going to the CEO saying, this is what's coming.
But I wonder how much they understand, because these are the same CIOs that typically don't have an asset inventory today.
I mean, yeah. So there's those.
I mean, there are some, but and they also, if you understand how all this works, complexity is the worst enemy, right? So why would it make any sense for me to add more complexity into an environment I already don't understand? Why would I buy anything?
Well, it may be parallel paths. I mean, it's not linear, right? I mean, so
maybe, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's
business isn't
it's a case by case basis.
You may, if you're a new CIO to an organization,
the business isn't going to stop if you don't buy this new IT thing.
It isn't. But here's the other thing: that was an example. It's not like every time everything's some sort of a tool that's necessary. There's a lot of things that organizations can do from a technology perspective that don't cost a dime and will save them from the next ransomware infestation.
I wonder if it will, though, because we do enough incident responses where they think it's going to save them from the next ransomware, but then they still get ransomware because what you found was you didn't use the technology you bought to protect you against the ransomware. You didn't use it responsibly. You didn't configure it right.
Yeah, that's lead a horse to water.
I know, and that's the sad thing, because the situational awareness thing is really, really important. When I buy things that I think are going to do something for me in an environment that I already don't understand, what I end up having is a false sense of security.
Yep.
My version of the situation is worse than it was if I was ignorant, almost. It's because at least if I didn't buy that shit, I would know that I don't have that shit. So I'm not going to fool myself into thinking that the shit that I bought is going to make me more secure. I don't know, man. And it's because I think what drives a lot of technology investments isn't logic. I think what drives a lot of technology investments is emotion. This fear of missing out. Like, oh my God, everybody else is installing this thing.
Yeah.
I need it too.
Yeah, the cybersecurity marketplace is rife with fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I mean, that is the the ambulance chasers and the chicken littles running around telling us that the sky is falling. I usually, when I talk about the escalation of sophisticated threats, I put it into context that these are what threats look like. But then there's also the conversation about what is the likelihood that these are going to be executed against your organization. If you're taking sound practices and methodologies to bolstering your risk mitigation, you're going to reduce some of the significant likelihood that these threats will take place. But it's good to understand what is that level of sophistication that exists, and understanding that. And I usually show this graph where from like 2020 or 2003 to 2023, the level of sophistication and the type of attacks. And I say that you can have a PLC that went into service that continued to do what it's doing, and its level of sophistication did not increase, but the threat actors have gotten better and have adapted. This is the gap that it is. And I think a lot of times when there are pundits out there that talk about the level of sophistication, they forget to put that into context and say, because of the legacy nature of some OT systems that can be 10 or 15 years old, if I have a threat actor or potential threat actor who is 15 years of age and is just getting into hacking, and I have a PLC that goes into service, that PLC is in service for 10 years. That threat actor is honing their trade craft. And by the time that threat actor is 25 and that PLC is 10 years old, let's say, there's a significant gap between the protection against that PLC and the threat actor. So that's, when we talk about simplification, that's what that is.
Yeah, I mean, but the case for the simplicity, the PLC that you put in had 4 instructions. It still only has 4 instructions. So even if your attacker is super duper sophisticated and can do all kinds of things that,
but it's everything else around it that can take it offline, and that's
bingo. And we're speaking the same language. That's the cool thing, is it's these different, because you're definitely more, I've worked a lot with OT, but I wouldn't profess to be an expert at OT. If I don't like to call myself an expert in anything, really.
I always say I'm just a professional, right? I aspire to be, but a subject matter expert. I know there's a couple dozen people in the world that I look up to that are a lot better at this than I am. And they would talk about the same thing, is that it's everything that's around the PLC that's the problem. It's not the PLC itself, because that's why air gapping worked. But air gapping is kind of a myth and a misnomer. It no longer works. It's no longer achievable because we do have integrations of data we have to be attuned to.
And had we started in a place where we intimately knew the environment we were working with, it's just state to state. You started in a secure state. The change was a secure change. You're still in a secure state. Had you started here, all these things would have been it made a lot more sense, and it would have been easier for us to secure it effectively. But what we've done is we've moved way faster than our ability to secure it. It's frankly out of hand. And I get when people say, I've never been a fearmonger, and I get kind of pissed off at people that oversell fear. And people that know me more than a few of them have said that if you see me freak out, then it's time to freak out.
Yeah. Then it's bad.
Yeah. I mean, you've been in enough incident responses. Last year, I was in my first ever Category 4 hurricane here. That was cool. I learned a lot of shit. I was trying to live stream that until I got hit in the head with a flower pot from somewhere. Yeah. It's just stupid stuff,
Life experiences.
Yeah, well, that's totally true. But the truth is, the adopting new technology, the complexity ball is rolling faster than the security ball. So the gap is getting wider. Have we made progress from a security perspective? Yeah, I mean, we're doing things we were never able to do before. But have we made progress in terms of risk? No, we have not, because we've adopted so many risks that we have no idea. And so we can't keep up with it because we continue to adopt this new technology faster than our ability to use it responsibly. And that doesn't just mean in manufacturing. It's the same in people's homes. You have OT in your house. Most people, not most people, but a lot of people. I have OT in my house. I have electronic door locks in a couple of different places. I've got controllers here. The difference is you use it responsibly. And what's responsible is understanding the risk and making your risk decision. I don't make risk decisions for you. So this is another place I think where we get a little mixed up from security perspective is you look at an environment and you're like, that's shit. It's not shit if they understand the risk and they've accepted the risk.
That's it.
Because they have a different risk tolerance than I do. That doesn't mean that it's worse than me. But it's this education thing. And as a CISO, my job is, we overcomplicate everything. I talk to CISOs and I ask them, tell me what your job is. What do you do? And talk to me like you're talking to my wife, not like you're talking to me. I speak your language, but the people you're working with don't. So explain it to me like that. And I've come to the conclusion that a CISO only does two things. Two. If you want to simplify it, you consult the business or the organization to make good information security risk decisions, and you implement those decisions. That's what you do.
I'd agree with that.
And there's a whole shitload of stuff that comes under that. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the same thing with when you talk about IT and OT, how can we simplify this so people can understand? Because the true logic, if you take emotion out of this, it's going to be really, really shitty. There's going to be a day of reckoning that it is going to hurt because there are too many unknown, unacceptable risks floating around in and around critical infrastructure that it's going to happen. There's going to be some significant outages and people are going to wonder, what the fuck? And I always think it's better if you learn how to do it versus being forced to do it, because that hurts more. So this IT, OT convergence in critical infrastructure, because I used convergence again. So for anybody who's listening, it's getting triggered. I just said convergence. What are some examples that we can think of, places to converge, like bring them together? Can you think of?
Yeah, the easiest example is going to be information that exists within the OT environments is exceedingly valuable to the business, right? So and the convergence is literally like connecting networks from the enterprise IT into the OT environment so they can suck that data out. There's a lot of different ways where you can get that data out of an OT environment without adding the complexity of other networks that are not necessary, right? So if I connect process control systems into a network that then ultimately leads to the rest of the enterprise, and the enterprise has connections to other networks like the internet, then I'm inviting risk. I would say one of the biggest examples is the business wants the analytics that are sitting inside those process environments because they want to take that and they want to try to drive more productivity, which is profitability. And again, like you had said before, it's speaking that business language. That is 80% of the examples that you would have. It's just always it's having visibility and being able to push those production systems further through the analytics at the business level. But any other convergence, there's a multitude of different reasons that people rationalize. It really comes down to, I had a network that used to not be connected to the enterprise that had the PLCs and the rest of the stuff. And then at one point I jacked it in. Sometimes I jacked it in so it was convenient for me to connect to it and work on the system. That's probably another reason for convergence. It's just convenience of access. And then there could be other reasons. But as soon as you jack it in or connect it in or whatever, that's convergence. And it could be for the simplest of reasons. It could be for the most altruistic of reasons. It could be for the most complex reasons. But that's it. So
yeah, I agree with you, man. And as a guy, I've been around long enough to, you can always smell bullshit, right? And I'm grateful that we have people like you. I think because you have more energy than I do now.
Appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah, because I'm an ADHD guy, and I do a lot of weird things. I'm definitely hacking shit all the time, just because it's not because I'm more skilled, right? We put hackers on like a pedestal, like there's some mysterious shit, no, it's curiosity.
That's what I was going to say. Largely, they're inquisitive.
Yeah, I'm interested. And it's not even that I think about it. It's ADHD, man. It's like I tell my wife I'm going down to clean the garage, and I come back up like, I don't know, 3 hours later, maybe. She's like, So how'd it go? And I'm like, how did it go? She's like, cleaning the garage. I'm like, shit, I didn't actually. Yeah, I spent 30 minutes playing piano. I took an hour nap, and then I started welding in the backyard. Forgot about the damn piano. And I forgot about the garage. But that's this curiosity. And I think that also plays well in, what we do, right? Before if I'm ever going to be in charge of securing something, I want to know it. And I want to know it really, really, really well, just like I would if I was attacking it. Because I'm not going to come where you're watching. Why would I do that? I would rather come through a place where that's why I'm big on, not big, I get pissed off at people that do pen tests when they don't know why they're doing pen tests. It's almost like, because you narrow scope, you give me something to test that you're going to be watching that you think is the most critical or probably the most likely way into your environment, whatever. But I've got this scope, I've got this test window, I've got this whatever, right? And a lot of times it's like, to equate it to something physical that people can understand, I tested the shit out of that second floor window. There is nobody ever going to get through that second floor window. Your front door is open. The
door's unlocked, right?
Your front door is open, garage door is open. Hell, you don't even have a goddamn garage door. And I think we do a lot of the same stuff with, this IT, OT stuff. And so, and I wish I could force everybody, you go back to negligence. In my opinion, if you don't know what you have, that should be negligent.
It could be.
You should be. Well, if
you're with intent choosing to ignore.
Well, and we get wrapped around the axle too. I saw a study or a poll or something. And the poll was, and it was security people, it was all security people. Who's ultimately responsible for information security? And you had 4 options: the board of directors, CEO, CIO, CISO, maybe, whatever. And only 23% of us got that right. The answer is the board.
That's what I've always said. It's at the top.
So we have 70, according to this poll, and if you were to do the math on it, it's probably plus minus 4, 5%, maybe, in terms of error rate, if you were to do the math. I didn't. So that, that means that 77% of our industry doesn't know who's ultimately responsible for information security in their organization. That's really troubling.
It's troubling.
And so I was troubled by that. And I thought, man, am I even doing this wrong? You start to question yourself, like, shit, I've always thought it was the board.
It is.
So I assembled. I don't call lawyers my friends. They're acquaintances, because I don't want anybody to associate me with those people. You can always get lawyers to go out to lunch with you if you pay. So I invited 4 to come talk to me about this. And so we sat down and I said, I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to just give me your opinion. Who's ultimately responsible for information? I repeated the same question exactly, verbatim, without hesitation. All 4 of them unanimous. And when you get lawyers to be unanimous about something, that's a big deal too. They all said it was the board. And so then I was like, here's my issue. Number 1, why the fuck don't we hold them accountable then? And number 2, why does my clan, my group, my people, why do they not know this? Because, so when you talk about this negligence thing, if you held, anyway, you don't have to do it once, by the way. If you found one CEO, one board of directors negligent for not having an asset inventory, watch how fast every single one of them wants a damn asset inventory. And I think that's at the root of a lot of these issues. Is it's still pervasive in society that this isn't going to happen to you. It's not going to happen to me, because people, going back to the social engineer thing, people only change what they're doing, 1, if they feel like there's a benefit in it for them. Like, I'm going to get rich if I do this, or I'm going to make more money, or get more prestige, be famous, or it hurts too much.
Yeah. Because
when you went to college, you had to take psychology 101, right?
There was, it would
the Pavlov's dog thing.
And I'm sure we had something like that. I was trying to remember back to like the first year cores and but I'm sure there was something in there. I forget. What I had, which was organizational thought, it was something like that. But it was like I was an entry level, business course. It was part of the communications degree, but I think it was organizational thought. But they dealt with it was more not on the individual like Psychology 101, but culture within an organization, let's say, or how groups operate together. So I actually found it fascinating, and people are very simple creatures.
Well, and they're analog, right? I mean, that's why I like computers. I like digital because it's discrete.
Mm-hmm.
It's on or off. There's no gray area. I mean, you think that there's gray area because there's just so many pixels that are black and so many pixels that are white that it looks gray to you, but they're all black and white, and that's how it works. Whereas people are analog and they're driven by logic and reason is certainly a piece of it, but they're also driven by emotion. And the easiest people to take advantage of are the ones who are highly emotional because you're not rational. You make decisions that you end up regretting later on. And you only have to look as far as the last heated argument you had with your wife to know how that works, right? You always make those decisions that you regret. Like, why the fuck did I say that to her? Computers don't do that. And neither do our attackers, by the way. Our attackers are just like, I'm here to make money, man. So I'm going to find the way in and I'm going to compromise that. All the OT people I've ever met, I think they're awesome people. And I think we have this mentality, and I'm giving you my opinion, and I want to hear yours because I don't know if you see it the same way, but it's always kind of felt like it's us versus them. It's not all us.
I think it's changing. The marketplace is causing that to change. There's a lot of people getting involved in that space. And I think if you have some of the old guard that bristles at the thought of IT, I think that's just going to change. It's generationally going to change because you're going to have younger defenders who are coming out. They're getting educated. They're taking the classes. They're understanding. They're learning. They're entering the workplace. They're learning. They're gaining real world experience. And eventually, you're just going to age out both on the IT and the OT side. Those that rail against each other, they'll just fade to black because the next generation is just going to be more tuned to working collaboratively and together. And then you're starting to see where, like even in helping develop course curriculum, working with Metro State and with Dunwoody Technical College here in Metro State.
Shout out to Faisal.
Exactly. Shout out to Faisal. Annually, myself and a bunch of colleagues, we sit with them and we talk about different areas of curriculum development. I do the same thing with Dunwoody Technical College and Julie McFadden and EJ Daigle over there. You're starting to see the blend of security on the automation side and automation understanding on the security side for those classes. So and it starts at the educational level. They're starting to blur those lines. And so the next group coming in is going to have some of those tools at the ready that didn't exist there before. So you'll just age out a previous generation, right? And then there'll be more collaboration just by design.
Yeah, and hopefully when we age them out, the one thing we don't want to miss out on, though, is certainly the wisdom, right? I mean,
sure, 100%.
One of my challenges with a lot of that, and I don't know enough about, there's about Metro State and some of the other, because the thing is with the post-secondary world is there's no standardization across the schools. It's a lot of academics and it's a lot of politics that get involved between. So, I don't know, like I said, I don't know about Metro State, but when I talk to people at MIT and I talk to people at San Diego State and National University, it's like
it's different.
They're all doing different things. And then I ask them I always like to know, like, what's your biggest challenge? That if I'm in this industry to try to help fix the broken industry, I need to know what the challenges are so I can think of ways, like, what can I do? Because the one thing I hear over and over again is their biggest challenge is finding internships. And I haven't had this discussion with Faisal yet, dozen or so other schools. And I'm like, why do you think that is? I want to hear your perspective and then I can share, mine. They don't know, mostly when we start here.
So you're saying like the schools are having a problem or the students are having a problem finding internships? Okay.
Yeah. I don't know why. I mean, I do know why they're not, but or why they're having the problem. But that's the challenge, is like all the schools are different.
Yeah.
It's like when I started working with states, I was naive at the beginning thinking that, oh, all states pretty much do the same thing. Holy shit. No, they don't.
It's like every organization, every company, they all have their own DNA. There's, it's like manufacturing. You say, well, there's only so many ways to manufacture a thing, but it's how an organization does that. They all have the same methodologies and principles of manufacturing. That's how they do it. It's unique,
right,
and it's going to be different. So, it's like, what do they say in Days of Thunder? Says there's nothing stock about a stock car. So, it's kind of like,
right. And what's the most common for the schools that, when we talk more about it, you find that you're not producing. I mean, look, if you look at it, take the human emotion thing out of it. You're producing a product that then there needs to be a demand for. So there needs to be a buyer for this product. And you don't have buyers that are interested in your product, is what you have. And so, and I can speak from our own experience, a lot of the students that we've had come talk to us, great people, smart people, but from a pure business perspective, you don't fit the need. You can't do the things we need you to do. And so then we're at an impasse. We can either teach you, but you're demanding a salary coming out of school that exceeds your worth. It's really difficult to make up that gap. So we end up, because we've always hired for the intangibles. We can teach you security shit. It's really not that damn hard. But I can't teach you to be a good person.
It's the personality.
Yeah, it's impossible to do that. I think that's why they pushed me out of all the projects and everything, and they kind of put me into this pasture of retirement almost, because I think I've lost my intangibles, maybe.
I'll say it ain't so.
I don't know, man. I'm feeling it. Tired. I'm older now. All that shit. So, all right. One of the things, I had a discussion. We do a lot of posturing in our industry. Did you know that? Yeah.
Yeah.
We do. And I was in this group, let's say, and it was a bunch of old timers, people that have been around for a while. And it was just so much posturing going on, right? And one of the guys said, well, I've consulted the last 4 presidential administrations on how to secure critical infrastructure.
Oh, that was.
So, well, yeah, right. So I don't do a very good job of checking myself sometimes. So I blurted out without even thinking. I just went with it. I was like, has the security of critical infrastructure gotten any better since you started consulting presidents?
Yeah.
Which basically got a fuck you. And I was like, I kind of expected that. But the whole point that I wanted to make here is your posturing, your intent on the posturing was to make yourself look good. What I actually see in you is a really shitty consultant. Because if you were consulting the president, my whole job as a consultant is to make things better.
Yep. You'd
hope. And so not only are you, in my opinion, a shitty consultant, but you missed out on a fantastic opportunity to make a big difference and help a lot of people, but you let your ego get in the way, which then led to another discussion. It was, well, what would you do? I'm like, oh shit, I didn't expect that. That's a good comeback. I'm like, what would I do? Well, I think number one is, if I ever want anybody to do anything, I have to meet them where they're at. I can't overwhelm you. I have to motivate you. I can't. Take somebody who's in a water treatment facility, pump manager, whatever, right? Their number one job is to get water to the houses in their community. Their number one job isn't to make sure that they're doing NIST CSF.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're going to give them NIST CSF and say, here, do this, that's not going to work.
Yeah, it's going to be largely ineffective for controls anyway, but yeah.
Right, and not to mention, they don't know how to do NIST CSF, nor does over half of our industry, right? It's, if you use it right, it can be pretty effective, but, I think a lot of people don't use it right. So I started asking a bunch of my friends, I'm like, what would you do? I don't know. I got ideas, but I don't know if they're right. And so I came to kind of the conclusion, I can ask just about anybody to do one thing, as long as you're capable of doing that one thing. I can probably get you to do two things if I can motivate you to. So two things. Let's just say two things. If I was going to secure critical infrastructure, what are two things? And the thing I came up with, and I ran it past all my people and stuff, and it was identify all entry points specifically. And if you want to be really specific, the most common entry point into critical infrastructure today is still single factor authentication on something. It's exposed on the internet. So I would identify
the IT networks.
Right, which is how they're going to get to it. I mean, you don't find a lot of just PLCs on the internet because most of them don't natively talk that language anyway. Maybe.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of PLCs that are hooked up to the net, to the internet.
Well, then I'd want to find those too. But I started with, okay, let's find all the single factor authentication and either shut them down or secure them with multi-factor. That's what I would start with. Because it's not anything we've done. So I talked to CISA people, which it's a love-hate relationship, me and them, I'm like, why don't we map the attack surface of the entire United States? And they're like, well, you can't do that. I'm like, why can't they do that? Well, who gives you authorization? I don't need a damn authorization. There's nothing illegal about scanning. The only way it would ever be illegal is if I bypassed any of your, because I've been here enough times and I've been not arrested. Not charged. I've been arrested enough times to know that what I can do is, as long as I don't bypass any security controls or degrade service, I can scan everything I want. So I don't need authorization. And two, I think it's a shitty question to ask me because the attackers already know this. Don't we want to know this? And so then they told me, well, okay, good luck. And so I decided I needed to find a way to do it on a map, so I could represent it visually. So I did the attack surface of all the counties in the United States. 3,144 counties. And I put it on a map. And I said, like this, do this. And the one thing that I thought was really interesting when I showed people the map, especially the non-security people, is they all looked at their own county immediately. And then they asked me the question, why is my county orange? Why is my county red? Why is my county green? Why is my county blue? And I thought that was such a because as a security person, I want this dialogue. I want you to ask me this. And I don't want to shame the counties. That's not the point. The point is to help the counties. I know a lot of county people. They're really, really good people. They don't have budget. They haven't been trained. It's just all kinds of things. So is that worth the effort, in your opinion? Being another security guy and one that I respect?
Yeah. Wow. I'm not going to, is it something that I would pursue? I don't know. I might start smaller with use cases and see, is it repeatable at scale? I might look for economies of scale. I think you and I would probably end up at the same place. I might not, even though I do bite off bigger than I can chew sometimes, I might not bite that big. But I think what I would do is say, okay, if I wanted to understand what the attack surface was, what is a smaller section that's repeatable that I can scale out? And maybe I end up at the counties, or cities or something to that effect and get there. But I think it's a pursuit. The downside is you play it forward. How does that become actionable information? I think I'd probably be more concerned with how do I take this information and make it a positive experience and something that's actionable. I'd want to answer that question first. It's like 100%. You said, is this motivating enough to get people to do something? Well, you already know the human behavior was, what's our county doing, right? What's our color? What are we looking at? So it's almost like it's like a gamification of something. Right? I don't have to be faster than Bear. I said to be faster than you. I don't want to be orange or red. I want to be green. So, and you would take this back. So if you showed this all the counties, they're probably the administrators may go back to their own department and go, how do I make this green? I don't want to be orange, so, and is that to say that, and it's not the intent, as you pointed out, we want things to be positive and we want things to be, moving forward, but there is a degree of shame there that can be used constructively. So does it have to get to that point? I don't know.
I agree with you completely. And I love that perspective because it reinforces some things in my mind. And it also I mean, it just reinforces some things because, I'm a big fan of transparency. I'm a big fan of different people's perspectives. I see the world my way. You see the world your way. And the truth of the matter is both ways are valid. Every perspective everywhere. Like, that's why, from the political shit, I'm not a political guy because I think it's a divider as opposed to a unifier. But I love talking to people who see the world differently than me. I'm really hard to classify too, but if you were to classify me, I would probably fall more on the conservative side of the world, which then I really want to see what non-conservatives think. Like, why do you see it this way? And it's not to change your mind, but to understand your perspective, because your perspective, the best decisions you ever make, or for me anyway, the best decisions I've ever made are the ones that had context, good context. The worst decisions I've ever made, and this is a piece of advice for pen testers too, by the way. When you're a pen tester and you specialize in things without understanding the broader picture, is your perspective is holy shit. In the broader context, taking into account other people's perspectives and other views, it may not be as big deal as you think it is. And the same, so if I were to make that decision just based on that one single perspective, it could cause more damage than good if I don't take into account everything else. So anyway, that was a big explanation about why I really value your perspective.
Thank you.
And I love when people disagree with it too, because there's I'm a firm believer that every perspective is valid because your perspective is your reality. So if you were to say something just like super crazy, and then I'm just like going to deny your perspective, what I'm basically telling you is your reality isn't reality, which maybe it isn't, but it's usually not the perspective. It's the conclusions you drew from your perspective that made you fucked up, I think. Anyway, whatever. But I agree. We have to, it's like anything we do, it can be used for good or it can be used for bad, right? I don't want to shame people. That's not the point. The point is for us to come together as a community, as a nation, understand us, make this part of the daily discussion. And that's why I'd like to get, I'm building the infrastructure more, because I did the counties. I did it all with open source tools, and it cost, I had six virtual private servers running, and it cost me a total of $250.
Nice.
So it's not as difficult as it is, but to your point, it can't be me who does this. It has to be the community that does this. It has to be us who do this. We have to recruit other people to participate in this. Colleges, universities, high school kids, mom and dad. Let's all scan ourselves. But building that infrastructure is important to do it in a way that it can't be used harmfully. I don't want some high school kid DDoSing, although I'd like to DDoS Microsoft, I'm not going to do it. All right. So that was a long discussion. So let's talk about just,
I would just
we're late here, aren't we?
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to talk about some of horror stories, because I want to talk about Stuxnet. That's
I know.
Probably the most, the most popular.
What we should do, and I do want to be respectful of time, and I've enjoyed the 2 hours, but I do have to.
Do I talk too much?
No, no, because it's just a stream.
It's okay to tell me the truth.
What we will want to do, so what we'll do is we'll do a part 2, and then we'll get to, because I have the list of things that we want to get to, and it was funny.
Yeah.
We were going through, I was like, yeah, I don't think we're going to get to this today. They're halfway through, it'd be another 4 hours. I'm like, I don't think I've got it in you. There are limits to even myself. And
that's why in the show notes I put in there we put in there Evan rarely follows the script.
Yeah, it should be a disclaimer. This is what we'll cover, maybe.
Yeah,
and then maybe we'll other stuff. So,
but the whole point of the podcast is to be authentic. It's to get to know.
Believe me, we certainly have that.
Yeah, and because that's so important. For me, it's like a mental health thing. It's so easy to try to be somebody you're not, the imposter syndrome shit, just be yourself. It's okay to suck at things. I suck at a lot of things. I'm good at a few things. I get paid well, which still baffles me. I don't know how that works. Because a lot of the stuff people pay me for, why?
Wisdom.
I guess it's when we started our vCISO practice, which has become amazing, mostly because of the management that's in place today. But when we first started the vCISO practice, and it was only me, I think, in the company way back when. I had 6 clients, and they were all paying me $3,000 to $5,000 a month. And my mission is to fix a broken industry, not to make a shitload of money. So it kind of dawned on me, like, I'm not really doing anything for you guys. So I went back to all the customers. I go, why are you paying me this? And they said, well, you're a vCISO. Duh. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not doing anything. And they're like, well, it's just nice to have you when we need you.
Yeah.
I'm like, that doesn't fucking cost you anything. I don't charge you for picking up the phone and calling me. Charge me for something I'm doing of value to you. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. I'm like pumped and ready to go. I could go all night, but I don't know what my deal is, man.
Like I said, we can do a part 2 and
look at these eyes, Paul.
It's like, oh.
Let's hack some shit, Paul. Let's do some live demonstrations.
Live demos. That's what we could do. That do some.
I know. I see your stack back there behind you.
I know. Yeah, good stuff here. So
to work on your cable. We need to work on your cable management a little bit back there, Paul.
A little bit. Yeah. It's never meant to get to that. There's stuff over here and there's stuff over in that corner. This is just a piece of it. And I love it. About every 6 months, I take it down and rework it.
The worst running car on the road is usually the one that belongs to an auto mechanic.
All right.
So,
that's for sure.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I thoroughly enjoyed this.
I did
you
too.
and I have met a few times, but the more I talk to you, the more I understand you, the more I learn from you, the more I respect you, and the more I actually enjoy your company. So thank you. I really appreciate it
very much. I appreciate that. This is probably the best couple of hours I've had in quite some time, and we'll do it again in a heartbeat. Like I said, we can get the other half of the list and carry this forward because there are some good points that you've got here. We can certainly get to.
Amen, brother. So yeah, we'll schedule a part 2 and we'll make it happen. Get some sleep. Try to keep your work-life balance. Whenever your wife says that, it's true.
100%. So,
all right, man. Take care.
Right. See ya. Thanks. Bye.